All right, thank you. And yes, we're at the end, so we might have to stay interactive to keep you excited and ready for where we're headed. I'm Dr. Julie Hayden. I'm a licensed psychologist, and currently I'm the CEO at East County Transitional Living Center. We also have Rhombus University and Genesis Recovery counseling centers, and all of the focus on what we're doing tends to be on trauma and really giving people a chance to transform their life, to restore relationships and be able to live a good life. So that's kind of the broad scheme of it all. So this is an exciting topic. I can't wait. The whole conference and the theme I think is wonderful. So I hope you will join me in some of this, maybe even get a little conflictual, because then we can grow and get innovative. So let's go ahead and get started. The first one's a simple one. I'd just like to know, where are you at with the concept of conflict? So I'd like to know, what do you think of when you hear the concept conflict? What comes to mind? And now you're at the end of a conference where you probably even have additional thoughts on it. What are some of the initial reactions that you think of when you think of conflict? Yes. I'll come for all of you. Go for it.
I think of an opportunity to solve a problem.
Okay, problem solving. Very good. Teresa.
I hear conflict, constriction, sort of like, whoa, no.
Okay, so you've got hesitation, constriction, maybe like a freeze mode type of thing happening. What else? Discomfort. Okay. Resolution. Look at our contrasting views already. We've got discomfort and resolution. What else do you think of when you think of conflict? Anger. Very good. What else? Crisis. Ooh, that's a good one. Difference of opinion, right? Here we come. Okay. We've got a conflict happening. There tends to be different ways people are looking at something, and it comes to a head. Anything else that you can think of? Internal. Okay, so we have external, and then do we have conflicts in our own mind and the battles that we go through internally? Absolutely. So, in all of this, the presentations that you've heard already, the conference, and then zooming in on this, the power of conflict. Why are we wanting to get tools to deal with conflict? What is the point? What is the value? So let's look real quick at the risks. Give me some risks if you are not good at conflict, or if the conflict has negative results. What are the risks we're looking at? Anybody have thoughts already? Maybe you learned it, maybe it's from your past experience.
Like
Avoidance. So think of this. Conflicts tend to happen with family, with the people we care most about. We can have conflicts with strangers, and we'll look at that as well. But most conflicts are smack in the middle of the people we care about most. What is at risk if that conflict does not go well? Relationships, okay? Relationship with your children, your significant other, your friends, your mom, relationships. What else could be at risk? Your health. We understand this, right? With science and biology of stress and everything else, it could affect your health. Your life. Absolutely. A conflict goes wrong with the wrong person, and that could affect your life. It's a big deal. There's significant risks if we are not good at handling conflict. We'll get into this more, but I think also that conflict being those different opinions, if you're not good at that, and so you don't share honestly that opinion inside you, then you're missing knowing the truth of another person. Are you in a relationship where they don't actually know what you think and want and the real aspect inside you, because you don't want that conflict? So there's a lot at risk if we're not good at conflicts. What are some benefits that could happen if we get good at conflict, if we're not avoiding and we lean into it and we just rock out conflict? What are the benefits that could come to us? Ability to show empathy. So we're stretching ourselves to see another person's point of view, where they're coming from, feeling what they feel in a moment. That's great for relationships. So now we probably have a lot more improvement in our relationships. What do we get out of our relationships if we're okay with conflicts and we're even benefiting from conflicts? What do we get for our relationships?
Positive communication.
Positive communication.
Well, you get to learn more about yourself and how to treat yourself.
You learn more about yourself and the other person. Intimacy. I'll never forget a time I was working with people with PTSD, military combat stress. And so they had really negative relationships with family members because of their PTSD. And it was stressful because they loved their family. And in that talk, we were talking about sometimes the relationships didn't make it. And is it worth it, to put the time and energy to keep that relationship when there might be violence? There might be, people yelling and screaming, a negative environment for kids, all of these things that are a risk factor. And the concept that came out of that was, if you make it through something like that, the dark, ugly side of it all, and you choose to stay together, and then you heal and come out on the other side, what type of intimacy is on the other side of that? That you stayed with that person knowing all of those aspects that we usually keep from people. And so the level of intimacy can go deep if you're able to hit conflict head on and make it to the other side. So any others that we've missed, the benefits that could come from you actually being comfortable, maybe even leaning in towards conflict for good things to happen? What could come? What about in other settings like your job or community involvement? What could come if you're exceptional at handling conflict and you make it through in a positive way? Resolutions, healing, restoration in communities, in families, in workplace environments. What else? Anything else? Absolutely. So let's say you're great at conflict and very different opinions and emotions come clashing together and you keep it going until there's resolution. Man, the creativity and innovation that can come out of that, there's a lot of benefit that we could get, seeing things from other perspectives and then leading into some kind of innovation that we may never have come to without that conflict, without the differing opinions coming together. So we've got deeper relationships. You're fine. We've got deeper relationships, innovation, creativity, healthy boundaries. These are all the benefits we can get. Why I want you to pay attention to this road we're on today. We'll tie it in at the end. Why we want to pursue being good at conflict, the tools to keep the relationship and to learn and to gain intimacy out of that relationship. A lot of values, but we don't want to forget the risks. You're going to enter into those risks of losing relationships, of physical violence. So we don't want to nonchalantly come to conflict. We want to come ready and careful to protect from the risks and gain those benefits that we want. So real quick, we're going to take some time to just look at our history. Now, actually, this is a fun topic you will find in research. There's a lot of amazing, brilliant people for many years that have studied humans and conflicts and different views. So I love that about research, how you can read some topic over here and you can think, wow, this person is brilliant. How they approach it is amazing. And their conclusions are absolutely opposite of this person that's brilliant and amazing and coming up with something totally different. So you can see themes through research of how people would view conflict as negative, a warning sign that something's wrong. Let's get back to homeostasis. And then others that would see conflict as natural, unavoidable, and leading to innovation and creativity. And all of those studying this, how they approach it, how even the conclusions, you're going to look at it and go, wow, that makes sense. That's valuable. So we're going to come to the end with our conclusions, but let's look at some of the big ones. So go ahead and move forward for structuralism. The main focus on this, and this will be kind of the oldest one I chose. There's many more even back to the 1600s, but the one I chose with structuralism, just to give you a picture of it, is the views that society is a system, interconnected parts, each serving a role maintaining social stability and order. Conflict is a disruption that needs to be managed to restore equilibrium. Now, even take this concept to families and systems theory. If you come from a counseling background, that we apply this to families, that we have a natural push to get everything back to how it used to be. Sometimes that's not good, but we have a natural drive for homeostasis. So we could have it with families, we could see it in society. Who here loves change? Okay, we got a couple. I do now. It wasn't always there, but now I enjoy it. You probably like a little bit of adrenaline also. So, novelty. Ooh, I like that. Most people don't like change. We like things to stay as is. And so when things start changing, that's a conflict that happens, and we're gonna sometimes run away from it or push it to change back to what it needs to be. So that would kind of, structuralism kind of comes in with this idea that it's kind of a warning that we need to get back to something stable, back to homeostasis. And so it emphasizes social norms, values, institutions like family, government, keep things in order, okay? Regulate behavior and reduce tension. And some of you talked about that with conflict. So the conflict comes and it produces anxiety and stress and fear and worry. We don't know what's coming because of this conflict. And so this theory would say, let's alleviate that. Get back to a calm state, reduce anxiety, and get to homeostasis. Go ahead and move to the next one. This one I really like. It kind of breaks it down into pieces, and we'll just give you a little bit of it. You have competing, collaborating, compromising, avoiding, and accommodating. Now, something I think's valuable in presentations like this is to tie it to something you already know. So if you've ever looked at parenting styles, okay, you have the authoritarian, that's all rules, no relationship. You have the passive, no rules whatsoever, do whatever you want, but they love you and they have a strong relationship. You have neglectful parenting where there's no rules, no relationships. Anybody heard of this before, the styles of parenting? Okay, it sounds familiar. So that's kind of what we're talking about in relation to conflict here too. So you have those that are competing, and it's to desire their own interests at the expense of others. You have collaborating, high assertiveness, high cooperativeness, and this could be that rules and relationships kind of where you have authoritative, that middle ground parenting that seem to be healthy. In this mode, individuals work with others to find a mutually beneficial solution. Compromising mode involves a middle ground where both parties give something up to find a resolution. Avoiding, individuals use this mode not to address the conflict directly. They sidestep, postpone, kind of passive aggressive, withdraw from conflict. The person is not giving their reality and truth to anybody. They're just scooting away from it. They're not going to address it. And then accommodating, that would be that passive person where they are not sharing any of their truth. This mode's characterized by a willingness to satisfy the other person's needs at the expense of their own. Okay, so this is a way of viewing conflict that's in our history, in our understanding of conflict resolution. And I love how it breaks it down. So that's just for us to have context before we get into how we are going to approach conflict. Keep going, one more, or two more, but one more deep one. With this one, it was kind of around the 70s, and it looked at constructive versus deconstructive, cooperative versus competitive or competition. And the competitive side would lead to destructive, and the cooperation would lead to constructive. So conflict is neither good nor bad. It can lead to something terrible, or it could lead to something good, depending on how you approach it. And I love this, the role of perception. So with models in general, you find stuff you love, you find stuff you don't like, and you kind of take some gold out of it. I love this. Perception of the conflict. Highlighting the importance of how an individual perceives a conflict. If parties view conflict as a mutual problem that can be resolved, collaboratively, they're more likely to engage in constructive behaviors. And if they see conflict as zero-sum game, there's no hope, it's either got to be me or that person, then they engage in competition and destructive behaviors. So I'm going to steal that when we decide how we're going to handle conflict in a moment. I'm going to bring that in because I think perception's valuable. Just take a moment again to probably connect it with what you already know, stress. Okay, stress can be destructive. We know this. It can take a toll on our body, but also there can be benefits. And if you think in your head, stress is dangerous and destroying me, and you have a stressful day, it could actually do more damage to your body. If you think, a little stress is fine, everything's okay, and your perception is that stress is not that harmful, it will actually do less damage to your body. It's impressive. Same thing with cancer and people's perception on the hope that they can get treatment and get better, or that there's no hope and they're not going to get better. It actually has an impact on their outcomes. So our perception is so powerful to actually have an impact on our behaviors and our outcomes. Restorative justice. Anybody heard of this one yet? Okay, this is a popular theory out there right now and used today because you do have conflicts like domestic violence and even violence against people for other reasons where there's this terrible destruction. And do we give up on the relationships or do we restore them? That's very controversial. Okay, so some would say, no, that person does not need to be restored. And some would say, oh, maybe there's a benefit to the family if it's restored. So this kind of has a path for if that conflict, even if it's a crime, domestic violence, or just some other version of conflict, that you look to address the needs of the victim, hold offenders accountable, involve the community in the healing process. And it's a dialogue-based approach, and basically the victim has that opportunity to share how it impacted them. They're protected in how this happens. It's not, in a way that more harm could come to the victim through this. And it's definitely got to be when that offender is ready and able to do this in a healthy way. But it's a whole process to make it through a crime or a conflict to restore a relationship, even if it was a significant conflict. And I think one more, and this has to do very specifically with domestic violence, but it's just actually so deep in our legal system that it's something that is by law used in our domestic violence offender groups, a 52-week court mandated. So it's older, and so we've come quite a bit from it, but this is still a requirement to be integrated in those who have been offended with, you get it, court-mandated offenders for domestic violence. So this is about power and control. So it looks as that's a particular conflict, domestic violence, but it looks at power and control and the fight for that and dominance. And there's a lot with it that's worth looking at. I think where I'm headed next is integrating more about our current understanding that takes it further, but there's a power and control wheel and ways that people use intimidation, emotional abuse, isolation, minimize, denying, and emotional control in order to win. Okay, and somebody loses. So I thought this was interesting because it's still used today, even though it's an older model, and I think we have a lot of advances from it. You're still going to hear it and see it in legalese, at least if you work with domestic violence. Okay, so as we are moving towards our tools for conflict, because we know how valuable it is for us to be good at it, so that we can gain intimacy and better relationships, so that we can gain innovation. We have some here, but what are the most common places you've encountered conflicts? Sports. Oh, I like it.
I was going to say bar, but
Bar. It's okay. No judgment here. But bar, any kind of substances that could just amplify conflicts happening too, or relationships huddled in a spot, you're going to have some problems probably. What else? Politics. Yeah, we've got our top ones, right? What are some ones, everybody's fighting about? Politics is right up there, especially right now. What else? What are the big ones that you avoid? Okay, racism, sexuality, religion. Okay, so there's some big areas that you just naturally find conflicts. And why? Because you have different opinions, different views, and they're clashing, creating this conflict. Now, traditionally, we might think, that's negative, let me avoid it. But I hope by the end of today, you're gonna lean in and see the value of entering that on purpose and see what comes from it. Go back one more. I got more. Okay, I just want to see if there's others. So family and friends, remember I said, if you think about it, a lot of the conflicts on a day-to-day do include people we care about. Anybody here have children, especially teenagers? I have 2 teenagers, but yeah, you had your day, right? Talk about conflicts, but family is a big one. People we love and care, we're gonna have conflicts. Anybody have work setting conflicts, maybe even happening right now? Okay? Everybody is very peaceful in here, so that's good. Yeah. So the reason why I'm asking this is because I want you to have an example that you're going to work through, on your conflicts. So I want you to think of an example. And to get you started, I'm going to share a story. It's one of my favorite stories. So, and somebody that actually knows the story was here, but she's not in the presentation. That's good. I'll change details anyways, but I was thinking how funny I'm here telling a story from many years ago, and a person that knew about it is here. So, when we get to tools, we're going to talk about a unique, special tool that can help you in conflict, that's just gold and amazing, and I'll teach it to you specifically, but this story is the first time I used the tool, okay? So I worked at a place that has overnights, and so 2 of us worked at overnight, and one person would sleep while the other person's working, and then you'd switch, and the other person would sleep while the other person's awake in this overnight setting with chronic mental illness. So your job overnight was a lot of paperwork stuff, cleaning stuff, organizing stuff for the next day. So the person that I'm going to be talking about that I had a conflict with, she would sleep first, and then I got to get it in order. I would wake up. Is that right? I would sleep first, and then I would wake up and I'd work the second half. So I knew what she did because when I woke up, it was my turn. So I knew exactly what she did in her job because I was second. I'd wake up and I'd do my job. So there's a particular morning where she started talking bad about me. And she said, I wasn't doing my job. I wasn't doing the paperwork. She was holding it all for me and doing everything for me. I was very young. She'd been there many years. And I'm like, what? I'm like, that is a lie, and I'm doing all your work for you. I know every time you don't do anything, and I do it for you. And I'm just like, ugh. So I was so frustrated, but I didn't say anything in the public setting. I'm like, ugh. So I go home, and I get some coaching, and I got a game plan, and I use the tool I'll teach you at the end. So I'm going to give you a little bit of it. When you have the conflict, get your one sentence that you want to communicate, and you have it, and that's all you use. Nothing else added. So I had practiced this, okay? So I had my one sentence, and it kind of was like, you lied in front of everybody. I need you to not do that again. Something simple. I don't remember the phrase, but I had it memorized, so here I go. And I was nervous. And I mean, she could, outwit me in a general sense. She's done this a lot of years. She's got the ranking. So here we go. Evening comes. And so I go, hey, I just want you to know, you said this. That's not true. I never want you to talk like that again. Something very simple, whatever I said. And she just started yelling, cussing. She had, you this and you that, and just all over the place. And every time I'd take a deep breath, and I go, I understand. You said this. Never do it again. And and this went like 3-4 times. Blah, 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 blah. Come back, say the statement. At the very end, she looks at me and she goes, man, I never thought it would be you to stand up against me. And she backed off, never had a problem again. Boy, was that fun. I went away like, oh my gosh, it worked. I was like, this is great. So that was the first time I loved conflict. I do enjoy it because there's value, but it was so powerful to not have to back down in fear or be passive aggressive or think of some way I tell on her or something like that. To just come very assertive, very clear, not back down, and have it work. It was powerful. So, and I've used that many a time since then, and people are caught off guard. It's clear, it's short, it's simple, you say it, it's the truth, it's accurate, and they can't say anything against it, and they back off. Okay, got it. It is powerful. So that's my example. So I want you to think, where are you having conflict that you're going to decide, is it worth it to lean into it and get some value out of it, or maybe not. So we're going to look at that. Okay. We have new understanding. Tell me how far I go, because I'll lose track and talk forever.
30 more.
Okay, good. So we have advances. We have history, and it's okay to look back at the old views of conflict resolution, and we want to look at all of them. That's part of our strategy, is looking at things from as many perspectives as possible. Okay? If you stretch yourself to look at things from a lot of different perspectives, how could that improve your perspective? Anybody? Have you done this? Have you tried it? And what comes from it? If you open it up to see things from lots of different perspectives, what changes? What comes?
Size.
If you turn yourself into a scientist, very left-brained, no emotions over on the left hemisphere, turn yourself into a scientist, exploring, analyzing, being interested in lots of perspectives on a topic, it's not emotional. That's helpful. If you have all the strong emotions, it clouds things. So yes, looking at things from multiple perspectives can be a strategy to keep yourself out of the emotion. Interesting. Good psychoanalytic version of it. Interesting. Let me think and explore and analyze. Very good. Let's look at some of these that inform us now on conflict. Trauma-informed care. This is a big one. And broadly, to sum up, raise your hand if you already have a good foundation on trauma-informed care. Okay, a few of you, yeah. It's pretty popular now. It's very helpful. It's the understanding, first and foremost, that trauma has a big impact on us, that childhood experiences shape how we think, shape how we interact with people, and put us at risk for other negative things. We also see, though, resilience and people just doing amazing things even when they come from trauma. But the big thing here is we know people can get triggered because of their past. Now, I'm a psychologist. This is really important to know, because I could start talking with somebody and they hate me or they love me, and it's only been 1 minute, and it has nothing to do with me. Something in their background could be happening and engaging in what we're going on, and they're reacting towards me. I don't know their background yet, and this happens all the time. I work with predominantly homeless, trauma, mental illness, addiction. So this is every day. They have a background of trauma, and guess what? Most people in this room are probably have a background of trauma, so that comes with them. And I say something a little bit authoritarian, like, you got to do this. I told you to do that 5 minutes ago. Oof, I just reminded them of something, and now they're yelling at me, and now they're frustrated. It's bringing up stuff. So trauma-informed care really reminds us somebody could have a reaction. You could be smack in the middle of a conflict, and it actually has nothing to do with you. It's their background. This is important informing us how we interact with people. I had, there's a time I learned this, and so this story is real. I tell it often, but it made a big impact on me, and it actually comes a little bit from cognitive behavior therapy, okay? Anybody at least familiar with cognitive behavior therapy? Okay? If you want to find an evidence-based treatment for a lot, it's CBT. And that is fundamentally that how we interpret things has an impact, right? So I was learning all this in school, and I was learning the idea that, we jump to conclusions and maybe we're wrong. So I worked at a bank, and there's a big long line. Everybody's so grouchy, and this one guy in particular is just awful. He's treating me terrible, saying terrible things to other people. And I just thought, man, what's wrong with this guy? I was getting ready to say something, but I had all this in my mind. So I was going to experiment like a good scientist. And I said to him, wow, seems like you're having a bad day. And he said, yeah, my wife died. That shocked me. And I backed away. Now, I don't want people to be rude, but I backed away. I'm so sorry. Please move on. I'm not gonna, I don't judge him as like, wow, what a terrible, rude guy. I'm like, that makes sense. That would be rude too. I would be having a hard time. That I'll never forget. And it just reminds me every day, I don't know the full story. I don't know where somebody's coming from. So we work at East County Transitional Living Center, and people are coming out of terrible situations, sex trafficking, domestic violence, homelessness, living in a riverbed with kids, hard, difficult places. They can yell and scream at me, and it may have nothing to do with me. It's their background, where they're coming from, where they were this morning that's impacting them. So understanding that and having that compassion, and that I will lean in and say, it's okay, I will try to help you. How can I help you right now? Even though there's a conflict happening right in that moment because of trauma-informed care. Also, flight or fight response. Now, it seemed like everybody in the world now knows about this system because of COVID, where we all lived it. We all knew exactly that our stress response was activated. Well, how this works, though, in what we're talking about conflict, is it's meant for protecting us. If our life's in danger, we're pumped full of adrenaline first, and we can focus, we have extra strength. What is the hormone that comes after adrenaline? Oh, of course you know, Dr. Ross. So cortisol, right? The stress hormone, okay? So cortisol pumping through your body and brain turns off your digestive system. You don't need to digest your food if your life's in danger. Turns off your immune system. You don't need to worry about catching a cold if your life's in danger. Turns off your prefrontal cortex, okay? Your good thinking brain that's supposed to help you make good decisions is shut off, okay? So now take yourself to that conflict with your significant other. Take yourself to the conflict with your children. Take yourself to the conflict with your boss, okay? If your fight or flight's activated and your good thinking brain is shut down, what do you say that you regret? No, what do you say that you can't take back? Okay? So understanding how the body and brain works with fight or flight is super smart so that you can have tools in conflict to not activate this system. If you go into a conflict and you're activating this, you're scared, you're stressed out because of this conflict that you've been avoiding, all the chemicals in your body are going to have that impact on shutting down your good thinking brain. Okay? And guess what comes out instead? All your raw emotions that your good thinking brain was calming down. All your 2-year-old, comes out, right? Freud had some things right, so that all that stuff in there that we're so good at calming down because we have our adult brain comes out when we let the fight or flight get a hold of us. So the good thing is we also have lots of tools for this, and that'll come in just a moment. We approach many things now from an individualized perspective rather than cookie cutter, right? That's because we understand humans and the complexity of humans now. Look at all the factors. Why would you not want a cookie cutter approach? Give me a couple examples of why we know people are complex and you need to hear out their story before you judge them and stick them in a box. Just give me a few. What are some reasons that could complicate things if you just, hey, I read in a textbook, and you treat somebody like that?
Unique individuals.
Unique individuals. What are some of our uniqueness? Cultural. Yeah, people come from cultures. And guess what? I read about this culture in this textbook, and now I'm presuming that applies to you. That's a problem too, right? We don't know people's background. What are some other things that really complicate cookie cutter approaches? Experiences. Absolutely. We don't know the experience of this person. All their experiences are influencing what's going to work best for them. So, hey, how many times have you seen like, well, I was a meth addict and this is what worked for me, do this. Well, this person is a whole different person with a whole different story. That's not gonna work for them. So it's easy for us to come with cookie cutter approaches, and yet we need to come with individualized treatment. So when it comes to conflict, same thing, we're gonna have to open our mind and come from lots of different perspectives, because we don't know people's culture, background, faith, belief system. All these things just make it more complex, that we can't just come at it one way. We have to have an openness. We talked about cognitive behavior therapy. There's lots through psychology that influences how we see things now, but bottom line is how you perceive, interpret, think about things has a great deal on how you feel, your emotions, and your behaviors. So let's look at conflict for a moment. If you're scared of conflict, you think bad things are gonna happen. What was your background with conflict? What was the first conflict you remember? Okay, think of childhood. What was the worst conflict? What did you lose in that conflict? You think that impacts you when a conflict comes in another setting? So you had a conflict and your dad left. I work with addiction primarily. I don't know how many times something had nothing to do with the relationship happened and the person left and they said it was my fault. The kid thought it was my fault. Now they're 40 years old, still holding this. It's like, it's not your fault. Had nothing to do with you, but we interpret things. So what kind of early experience with conflict has a big impact on how you handle it now? Okay? And that's the power of cognitive behavior therapy. We have lots of research out of leadership management tools that we can pull with conflict. So here's some great ones. Has anybody heard of transformational leadership? If you haven't, I would research it. I just love it. Instead of do this, don't do this kind of style, it's inspire people. Inspire people in workforce, in wherever your settings are. Inspire them to want to pursue something with you. This a lot of times has to do with a vision for the future. Get them excited about wanting something better. It's a tremendous opportunity to use some tools for conflict. Conflict's happening here, your tunnel vision, blah, 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 yes, no, yes, no. It's like, hey, this is what we want in our future together, right? Let's get there. So you pull them out of that conflict and you inspire them for something for the future. So we can pull from that model to learn some tools. Situational leadership. This was not ever super popular as far as showing research on value, but I love the concept of you might adjust depending on the person and the situation. And so it looks at, you as a leader being able to adapt, coach, delegate, problem solve. And so in this situation, this is how you handle conflict. Over here, you're gonna do totally different because this person's different. I love that concept. It has some great tools in it that we can pull for how we're gonna handle conflict. So go ahead to the next one. Here's the gold. And I wish we had 3 hours, but we don't. So we'll get to it so you can have time to kind of apply it to your situation. But if we get good at conflict, there's a power we will have to restore relationships, keep relationships, move forward at our job, bring people together that never would have been able to come together before. We have a unique advantage in our personal life, our work life, and in our community. Imagine the power of conflict at a community level. If we knew how to engage it, get to the other side, and have relationships through it. That is a game changer. So let's look at just some of the gold, some of the tools you can use tomorrow. Number one, slow down, okay? This has to do also with the fight or flight. If there's a conflict and you get caught up in it, so you're scared or stressed or anything else, maybe you're avoiding it, so it's building up and you're afraid the next time you're gonna see that person and you're gonna have to address it. If that's all happening, slow down so that fight or flight doesn't get the best of you, okay? And what else could slow down help? If you're getting ready to enter a conflict or you're in the middle of a conflict and you slow down and don't make rash decisions, what comes? You give yourself a chance to think things through evaluate more information, and respond how you want to instead of react. And if you're reacting, that's your gut. Hope you got a good gut. Most of us don't, you know. Yes.
The other person can feel like they're being rushed.
Okay, very good. They feel rushed. And what happens when you have a conflict and you want to hurry up and say everything you need to say to make sure that you get your point in there? Where does that go? We know, right? Bad things are coming. An explosion, you know, it's coming, and it gets intense very quickly. There's true risk, we talked about at the beginning, of violence, of danger. We can't take that lightly. We don't want to escalate and actually take things too far. So if we can control our response to slow down, we give it a chance. Let's see where this is going. Multiple perspectives. We talked about this. I have a company called Rhombus, and the idea is looking at things from multiple angles. We call it the Rhombus model. If you have a diamond and you're kind of shifting it all around to see things from as many perspectives as possible, think creatively. How would a child see this? How would a judge see this? How would, you know, you're just stretching your mind to see things from different perspectives. That's tremendously value and gives us wisdom when we move forward on anything. Well, guess what? Conflict will give you that. If you're in a conflict, you better believe somebody thinks differently than you, and it's clashing. So take time to see, where are they coming from? What is their perspective? How did they get there? That you don't jeopardize yourself doing that. You don't lose yourself. You're stretching that perspective. Now you have more to add to the picture when you decide what you're going to do next. Attitude. You can wear an attitude. Okay, you put it on. Walking in a room, are you open-minded, flexible, adaptable of all of your response and your body mannerisms and everything else? I got to go quicker on time, so I'm going to keep going, but we'll come back to some of this if we have time. Set the stage. Okay? Don't let a conflict catch you off guard if at all possible. Set the stage for the best outcome. So if you know a conflict is a brewing, and you know you're going to have to deal with, like the lady, I didn't do it in the moment. I couldn't in the moment, but I didn't. I'm glad. I prepped for it. I was ready for it. And you want not just for you to set a stage that helps you, but also the other person. Where are you going to be? What is the environment? What do you have control of in the environment to create an opportunity for it to go well? You can have the environment, time allocated. Did you give yourself 10 minutes for this conflict, or is there enough time to not feel rushed? Give them a heads up so they're not caught off guard. Let them know you want to talk and that you're excited to hear their perception too, that you want their input so they don't think they're coming into a head-to-head conflict. They know you want to have a discussion about it. And body language. So you can watch YouTube videos on this, get good at it, you know. Body language goes a long way. So do you know how you come across? Do you know how your facial expressions are taken? Okay, so learn about it if you don't, but what do people say? So if they say everything you're thinking is on your face, you got to get better at a game face, and you might have to practice. That's a great tool to have. It's not fake, it's leaving a door open, okay? So if everything on your face says, you know, I don't care what you're saying and I'm tired of this conversation, they're going to feel it and they're going to close off. If you have an openness about your body and your face, they might enter into a conversation to get somewhere good. Identify the goal. So take a moment to think about your conflict. I wanted you to have an example. We might run out of time, but I still want you to have an example of a conflict that you have experienced recently, could experience, should, but you've been avoiding. And I want you to try to think of the goal, because that's important. We might look at a conflict and we might think that it's, you know, to win, to get what I want, you know, or we think of, you know, give me one good goal. Anybody have an example of a good goal out of a conflict? This could be personal to you if you can think of one. And you can use mine as an example. What do you think my goal was in the scenario I told you about? Anybody have an idea of what my goal was going into that conflict? set a boundary. And the boundary was, I didn't want her to talk bad about me to my boss and lie. That's it. Don't say lies about me. So I wanted to set a boundary. Okay? So it's very clear. Sometimes, and tell me if I'm wrong, but I believe this is true, we enter into a conflict and we got 1,000 things we want to get out of it. What's some of that's not healthy, but very common and normal and natural? What are some goals people usually have when they go into a conflict?
Have the last word.
Have the last word.
To be right.
To be right.
Be understood.
To be understood. To be understood is powerful. Is that a realistic goal sometimes?
How would we know?
To be heard.
How do you measure it? Yeah. To be heard. These, if they're so broad, you might be setting yourself up for it not going well. Can you make it tangible? Can you make it clear? Like, what if the goal is that you have better communication? Is that tangible? You know, so deciding together, I would recommend thinking of it ahead of time too, but maybe eventually you come and that's the first conversation is, hey, what is our goal? We've been fighting about this. What is the goal in the end? And then you're going to go back to, are we compromising? Are we, you know, how do we actually get to the goal? That'll come with time. But first, what's the goal in the first place? That's going to give you a chance at success. Now, anybody heard of a SWOT analysis before? Okay? We use this in business. We use this in a lot of things. This is a tremendous way to, in a non-threatening way, get lots of perspectives out there. Okay? So if you think of your conflict, what are the strengths that come? Let's say, I'll just use my example. I wish we had more time. I get your example. So just take it for what it is and apply it later. In mine with this lady that I was having trouble at work, what will be the strengths of entering into this conflict? You know, and getting all those up there. What would be the weaknesses? Click a couple. I'll come back to this in a sec. There's a SWOT. Keep going. There you go. What would be the weaknesses? You know, I was young. She'd been there for a lot of years. I'm not really, you know, I wasn't really experienced at that time. What would be the opportunities? There could be a great growth in me. It was a game changer in my life of how I viewed myself and my capability. And I worked with chronic mental illness. You better believe I needed that later. There are times I was faced with stuff I had to put an assertiveness out that was way beyond what I was skilled for. And I just had to fake it. You know? But that moment in time gave me a confidence to do that. So what opportunities and what threats? We talked about the model for domestic violence. There are conflicts with real threats. Is it worth it to go into this conflict? Do I go in this conflict alone, or do I bring others around me? Think of the threats. So if you can map out a SWOT analysis, this is a tool to slow you down. So instead of entering the conflict, you map out a SWOT analysis. We do brainstorms, so it's a whiteboard and free-for-all. Okay, so blah, blah, blah. You put a topic and all the topics you could think of, and it's just like no barriers, just put all the topics out on the whiteboard. That's a great tool too. SWOT analysis is for the structured ones that need a box to put it in. Okay, go back up a couple to the, here. We talked about this, but vision. So if you can tie it to something important, something valuable. Remember we talked about the leadership model, transformational leadership. A lot of those leadership models out of that kind of category, they talk about how you don't need to be charming, good-looking, charismatic to be a leader. You just have to have a destination people want to go. That if it's a bus and it's going to Disneyland, nobody cares the shape of the bus or the bus driver. You know, it's like, I'm going to Disneyland. So the destination is important. So with vision, if you have something super valuable that we have in front of us, if it's a work environment and we want to achieve a goal, we have something valuable, meaningful up in front of us that we're going for. Now when we deal with our conflict, it's a different setting. We want to share our views, but hear the others because we want to get to the goal. We want that vision. If it's a relationship, what is the vision we want at the end of this? That's a powerful tool in the middle of conflict. and then assertive communication. And this is the one that I shared with you already, but we're going to take it a bit further. And actually I'm going to skip and come back. So go, I think I have yeah, there you go. So if there's any tool I've ever learned and loved so many times, it's assertive communication. Okay, sounds so simple, but I don't think humans are good at this by nature. So I'm just gonna lay it out so you can come in to see what I'm talking about. You have aggressive communication, where people share their truth at somebody else's expense, okay? So you've got violence, intimidation, I mean, they're loud. It's like, could you quiet down your truth for me, please? Thank you. You know, but they're good at it. They're telling you their truth, okay? You have all the way on the other end, passive. Now they're very quiet and peaceful. Oh, they look good, but it's not real. They're not sharing their truth. They have a whole inner truth, their real self inside that nobody knows. So they don't trust, they don't have intimacy. That's not a win. But that can look very peaceful over here. Now you got my favorite, which does come natural to me, is passive aggressive, okay? Where you look like you're telling the truth, but you got a sneak attack later. You know, you throw some guilt in on that person, or you come back and they're gonna regret it. So passive aggressive, right? Now you come to the good one that is a tool, especially in conflict, but many areas, and that's assertive communication, which I defined as truth with nothing else added. Okay? So it's what you want to share with that person with nothing else added. Okay? If you're going into a conflict and you can prep, what is the goal? What do you need to communicate to them? What's the clashing idea? And you need to come in with that. And you can have it in one sentence. Maybe you can't get it to one, but it's concise. You have your goal in mind. You know what it is. You come in and you say that. It's very natural in a conflict that they're going to come at you with anything and everything else. They're going to remind you what you did when you were 5. They're going to throw something in your face. They're going to tell you all the things that you didn't do right and why we're here in the first place. They're going to come at you from every other area. Take a deep breath, calmly, I understand, but say your one sentence. Don't say anything else. And if you have, sometimes that's the time to leave. I love you, I care about you, you want that relationship. If all of this happens and you don't have the connection, you have lost something. Maybe it's important that that happens, but what a great thing if you can have that conflict with the relationship. So you can say, I care about you, I understand, here's what I need to communicate. And that's it. And you're not caught in the weeds and you don't go on tangents that just hurt and create the outcomes that you can't come back from, okay? So that, and then we'll go back up to goals. I started with my favorites to see how much time we have. So the assertive communication is your, what was that? 5? Is your main tool, hopefully out of here, to do well in conflict and keep it. If you can keep it, if you've got your goals and you're able to, you have innovation. They're going to come up with stuff that you never thought of. Right there in the middle of the conflict, you're going to have a light bulb. Wow, I never thought of it from that perspective. You're going to have intimacy and connection in that relationship that you didn't know was possible. You're going to see their perspective and have empathy and understanding in a different way if you allow for the conflict. And you're going to have healthy boundaries. If you're good at this, you go into conflict, you're going to be able to set healthy boundaries, which lets you have relationships with more people. Your work environment is going to be better. Instead of going through and having this daunting aspect of this person you got to deal with, now you're going to come in ready with tools. You're going to get a collaborative relationship out of it in the end. You're going to have so much opportunity in multiple areas that it's going to be a tremendous value, hopefully not just for yourself, but the others that you're collaborating with and entering into conflict with. What if you teach others the same thing and more people are comfortable with conflict? Feel the power that can come through it and what it can bring to our community. So I'm going to pause and leave a little bit of time for questions, but hopefully out of all this, you lean in to conflict. And maybe not today, but you practice these, you get good at it, you try it, and I want you to go, it worked, like this worked. That is nothing to fear, it's nothing to avoid, it could bring value. Yes?
So, I got a thought about it.
Sure.
How does that work?
Yeah, absolutely. So you got two sides to this, right? You've got tools you can learn for the in-moment conflict, your parking spot. I will take this parking spot, you need to go somewhere else. Assertive communication. Or, hey, not worth it, take my parking spot. So you can get good at in-the-moment conflicts also, and that's gonna be controlling your fight or flight and having ways to respond, and basically how do you respond in crisis situations. That's gonna be all your great tools for that. Those conflicts are important. But what I care about more in this presentation are the conflicts with the people you love and care about, the people that you work with every day, and sometimes those conflicts hit you head on. But what I love, and this comes from crisis intervention, I steal this from working with people with schizophrenia, working people with, a chronic mental illness. I agree in the moment, in a conflict like that. I say, I get it, I understand it, that makes sense. Would you mind if we plan a time to talk about this tomorrow? Okay, so if it's somebody you care about, somebody you work with every day, those are the ones that mean a lot. Those are the ones that can change your entire life if you manage the conflict well, good or bad, it can go one direction. So those are the ones I really care about. So those ones, in the moment, you could say, I get it, that makes sense. And maybe that's not sincere, you can decide for yourself, but usually there's something you can make sense of it. Okay, I understand. Thank you for sharing that. I want to think on this more. Would you mind if we came back and talk about this later? So you just put a pause on it if at all possible. Maybe it's not possible, but that'd be the goal. Find a way to pause, come back, and you create the setting. If you enter it right in that moment, there's a high chance you're going to follow wherever the conflict wants you to go instead of you directing it. So if at all possible, pause, delay, distract, set up how you can handle it well. But yeah, absolutely. I think any tools for crisis intervention is what you're going to use for the conflict in the moment, which you got to be ready for as well. Does that help a little bit?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, awesome. Any other questions? Is anybody going to purposely try to get into a conflict? I really want you to. Okay, yeah, I got one, yeah. Because I want you to test it. It's easy to say there's power in conflict. It's easy to say good things are gonna come, but I want you to test it and see. And if even you're a little more comfortable with conflict, I think you're gonna be better off for it, your family and your coworkers are, and maybe our community.
Well, it just makes it harder.
Yeah, absolutely. The power differential is a factor. So I would say work with multiple people. If you work with multiple people before you go in, like if you have the luxury of purposely setting up the meeting, brainstorm with others, okay? Then when you come, I'm getting distracted. I'm trying to hang on to my thoughts before I lose it. I may or may not have ADHD, it was good too. Brainstorm with people.
If you have the opportunity to talk to other people first.
Other people first to figure out what's your goal.
Yeah.
This is your boss. So what's your goal and why? And is it worth it? Weigh out the risks, weigh out the benefits. Get your one sentence. Probably, even if they don't agree, they will respect you for having that confidence to bring that to them. So I would just say do a lot of prep work and really consider what are the risks, what are the areas of opportunity, and you're weighing them. And if you're going in, you better think of as many scenarios as you can on how it's gonna go. You come in slowing down, being in a good spot mentally and emotionally, act like a scientist so you keep in your left brain so you're not caught in the fight or flight. Have your one sentence, get it out, get out of there. Yeah. All right, I think we're done. Yep, thank you all very much. Appreciate it.